And I'm now joined by a brilliant panel, pugnacious. Pugnacious is a word created, I think, specifically for Kelvin MacKenzie, former editor of The Sun, and on his maiden appearance on GB News, Andy MacDonald, who is an independent political commentator. And I'm very pleased to welcome you, Andy.
Thank you.
Do you want to stick up for the nanny state?
I'll give it a good go, I'm sure. I mean, not so much a nanny state, but I do think that we should have a government and a kind of administration that looks after its citizens. You know, you speak about the kind of tax benefit cycle. You know, most of these benefits are being assessed as being dependent on the NHS, you know, being dependent on binmen. That's the kind of thing, not physical money being given to recipients. You know, it's a general thing that anybody could use.
But because the state provides it, we then get told what to do. So there are proposals that we should put out half a dozen different bins for the convenience of the state. Whereas actually, if you do things privately, the binmen come round to you and they do it to your convenience. So the state takes more and more control of what you do because it's providing it.
I don't think, you know, bins should be privatised and, you know, rubbish collection should be privatised. We already have enough of that with, you know, kind of private skips. I think the government and local councils particularly, I think it is down to regional councils, you know, district, borough and county councils, how they run their bin system, because I know in my home, Mansfield, it's very different to Nottingham, because it's a different council, so, you know, this isn't a central government thing, this is a regional administration thing.
But isn't this the problem, that once the government does something, it takes control? So actually, there used to be a weekly collection. People could put whatever they like in their bins. Now they get fortnightly collections, and they're fined if they put the wrong things in the bin.
Well, I must correct you on one thing. Round my way, which is Weybridge and Surrey, we get bins taken once a week. So Triumph for Elmbridge, which used to be Conservative but isn't now, and nor likely to be for some time. But the fundamental issue is that we are subsidy junkies. When you're given an option of somebody else paying, which always makes me laugh, anything that ever happens, whenever they carry out a poll, it always says in it, would you like to raise taxes to be hypothecated in some way? And more than 50%, or just around 50%, always say yes. Why is that? Because 50% don't pay income tax anymore. We have now got to an absurd situation where actually I think some very small number, like 6 or 7%, now pay way north of 50% of all income tax. This is not a fair society, because what it means is that the money is going from there and is now going over there. So there is a massive resentment. And so we've got to come out of the subsidy aspects of people's lives. But parents are to blame as well. So, for instance, I have very, very clever mum and dad. They didn't have virtually no money anyway until very, very late in their lives, and so there was no possibility of handing money to buy your house. Now every family is now saying, how can we give money to our children to buy their house? Why don't we actually say to them, wait until you're 35, 37, 38, once you've got a couple of kids, see what you've made of your life. If you haven't made anything of your life, then have this money. And if you have made something of it, honestly, you should set fair on yourself and wait for the inheritance.
But to come to water, there is plenty of water in the UK.
Yeah.
We know this on a daily basis, great topic of conversation. What business of the government is it to say don't have power showers?
Well, you know, we know we have a lot of water. You know, just behind, you know, one of the greatest rivers, I would say, across Europe, in fact. I think on the power shower issue, I think that was a variety of suggestions that were given. You know, the river water in our country at the minute, this is a fact, is environmentally, it's a nightmare. It's not healthy. We should be using the natural water. But that's not because people have power showers. That's because of effluent going into it, which is a completely different problem at the other end. Why don't we just, as the market would do, ensure that there's greater supply? Because the raw material is there, the water is there, it's just we haven't built a reservoir, since the 1970s or something. The standard of the water just isn't good enough to take. I think that was the main issue that was being highlighted. You know, the supply is there. You know, we've got plenty of water in the UK, but the standard of the water is not fit for consumer usage.
But isn't the solution...
on the water issue, I absolutely object to somebody telling me whether I can have a power shower or not. And anyway, this is all pushed way into the future. It's a suggestion. Why don't they just keep these daft suggestions to themselves? There are enough issues in this world without being told that number one issue or even number two issue. And the other thing is, how much pressure is the loo water going to take, and all these other things, rather than concentrating on, are we actually creating enough water Yes, we have enough water. How do we get it to the people who are prepared to pay quite a lot of money? Has anybody seen their water bills lately? They announce without the slightest bit of a red face at all that everything's going up 7, 10, 12%. Nobody cares. Nobody cares anymore about the size of the water bill because compared to the energy bill, it's nothing at all. And on that energy thing, so, somebody decides, oh, isn't it disgusting? Look at those profits. Nobody ever says to a company when they're losing money, I tell you what, the government should subsidise the fact because we want to keep people in jobs.
Well, they did with the railways, for example, over COVID.
Because it's nationalised.
Because
it's
become nationalised.
And it's stunningly inefficient, badly run, loses billions.
Jacob, in all fairness, it was your government that did.
It was not my government, it's His Majesty's government.
His Majesty's government did offer
but
quite a lot of the money over the
pandemic. It's a complete
pandemic.
racket because most people go in their cars. It's 80% of Jones. We're getting onto that later. Yeah. But governments love railways for some eccentric reason. But let's get to sin taxes because they really do fall hardest on the poor. The well-off can afford the amount of tax on a bottle of wine. The least well-off are hit again and again by sin taxes, a higher percentage of their income. Is this fair? Is this right?
It is and it isn't. Things are unhealthy and people should be discouraged from doing things that will innately damage them. But,
do you honestly believe that people should be that they should be told, look, that jam donut's not good for you? But the idea of saying that jam donut, we're going to move it on from £1.40 to £2, and in some odd way hypothecated into the National Health Service is ridiculous.
Obesity is one of the largest killers in the UK. When COVID wasn't even one of the largest killers, and we shut down the entire country for 2 years.
But that was a mistake. I mean, that's what happens when you get the nanny state. You shut down the economy, and you have worse health effects.
You can pick up a bottle of red wine from Sainsbury's for £4. It might go up to £4.50. It's not really going to make a big difference.
£4?
£4.
I tell you what, I don't know where in Sainsbury's you can pick up a bottle for £4. I spend a lot of time looking for red wine. And
I can assure you, I was only the other day, I was in Sainsbury's in Mansfield.
I'm reassured that Kelvin can't get his Mouton Rothschild for £4.50 in Sainsbury's, but it's the principle, isn't it, that the people who are imposing these taxes don't get affected by them because they are in higher economic groups and they hit their voters much harder and disproportionately, and then you get more dependency because you get the benefits having to be paid so that people actually afford the basics of life.
To an extent, yeah, but you could apply that to anything, really. I mean, for cigarettes, for example, they've been taxed to death, but people still buy them. Rich people are still going to be buying wine and jam donuts, the same as poor people are.
The least well-off are more likely to smoke, so the taxes on tobacco fall more on the least well-off.
I don't know. I wouldn't.
No, they do. I mean, this is statistically true.
But they still have to pay the same prices, whether they're poor or rich. The tax will affect everybody.
Do you think we actually focus too much time? I mean, it politically fantastic, especially if you're a socialist, to talk about the poor all day long. Because doesn't it make much more sense to actually say that we are massively in favour of ambitious, potentially successful people, so that they create wealth, so that we end up in the position in America where the average earnings for a worker there now is $63,000 a year. Right? We can only dream of this issue.
That requires freedom so that people know that if they do something they'll benefit from it, rather than the infantilisation of the nanny state.
Yes, but we're getting to the point, aren't we? No matter the taxation has got to the point under a Conservative government, and they've had some bad luck and they've had some bad leaders, but under a Conservative government where taxation is now a massive issue. Our wages are not rising fast enough, but our taxation is, and therefore people are worse off.
Well, I told you the panel would be worth listening to, so I'm very grateful to them, but don't forget to let me know what you think. You know the email by now probably better than I do, mailmog@gbnews.uk.